minutes and counting.
So did you know that your phone will stop recording after 17 or 18 minutes or so of a video if you're not like moving it around, I guess? Okay, whatever. So let me try to pick up where I left off. I hate it when it doesn't record the first one because the first one I am so good at. All right, so we talked about the coding matching up. How depending on how those codes match up, you might have different traits being able to be seen. Okay, so who was Mendel? I already told you that he was a monk, okay? And back when before Mendel set down this really interesting bit of scientific information, people thought that children inherited their looks from a blending of the mother and the father. So if you had somebody with extremely blonde hair and somebody with extremely dark hair, you would get that brown hair. I know, common sense would tell you it would be gray, but you know, that's not, it was way back when, okay? If you had a brown-eyed mother and a blue-eyed father, the baby would have the green-eyed or hazel eyes. If you had a really, 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 really tall father and a really, really, really short mother, the baby would come out medium height. So they thought it was a blending. But Mendel studied pea plants over time, over 8 years, and he was able to isolate and make true bred or homozygotic plants that showed which traits actually were dominant, which traits were recessive, and if there was any codominance. And it was really, really neat that he was able to do that. They had, the peas had a number of traits, like tall versus short. Tall was dominant, short was recessive. So anytime you mixed a tall and a short plant, if they were true bred, if they were homozygotic, if you mixed a tall and a short plant, the offspring would be tall. If you mixed a purple and a white flowering plant, true bred, homozygotic dominant, homozygotic recessive, then your offspring would all be purple. Okay, so he could see that there was some dominant traits that hid the recessive traits. There was green as dominant over yellow peas. There was many, many others that Mendel was able to look at and say, oh, that's what happens. Okay, so he came up with a couple of really, really important laws, okay? The law of segregation. Now we're talking about genes. The law of segregation says that there are two parts of a gene, or a pair. Those are called alleles that are separate from each other in the formation of sex cells, okay? That's really important that you understand meiosis so you can say, okay, if this is a diploid cell and these are going to be haploid cells, then this has too tall, too short red, too tall, too short yellow, then each one of these cells is going to have a red and each one of these cells is going to have a yellow. But this could be tall, short, tall, short, yep. And this could be short, short, tall, tall, depending on how it randomized its assortment. Okay, the law of segregation says that half of the sex cells carry one allele and the other half carry the other allele. Okay, half of the sex cells carry one particular allele, the other half carry the other allele. All right, the other thing that was really, really important to understand is the law of independent assortment. This says that just because you see a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people does not mean that blonde hair and blue eyes go together. Just because you see a lot of brown hair, brown-eyed people does not mean that brown hair and brown eyes always go together. Okay, in the ovum or the sperm, you have segregated alleles. Okay, you have one go in here, one go in here, one go in here, one go in here. The law of independent assortment says that due to that, we need to understand that the independent assortment means that any egg, any sperm could have either one of the alleles. Any egg or any sperm can have either one. It does not go together. Just because I have, I'll give you an example, my daughter Draven. My daughter Draven carries she has brown eyes, okay? But she carries a light-eyed gene. So just because she has dark hair and dark eyes does not mean that all of her children will have dark hair and dark eyes. She has the ability to have children with light eyes or light hair because those are the genes that I've given to her, but they don't have to go together. It doesn't have to be dark hair, dark hair, dark hair, light hair, or light hair, light hair, light hair, light hair, dark hair, dark eyes, light hair, light eyes. It could be dark hair, light eyes, light hair, dark eyes. It's independent. They change, they switch up however they want when they're going through meiosis. Okay, we're not going to watch that. You can watch it on your own time. All right, let's try to pull this together. All right, Mendel found in his experiment that different traits could be dominant or recessive. So you know in most friend groups, you've got that one friend who is just loud and boisterous and he attracts all of the attention. And then there's always that quiet one in your friend group that is always there and they're really important and everybody loves them and likes them, but they don't demand attention. They don't want to be in the spotlight. They'd rather just hang back and enjoy the show. Dominant is that powerful friend who walks into the room and just takes it over. Recessive is the one that steps back in the shadows. Okay? They go together. They're part of an important group, but one does overshadow the other. That's just the way it is. Okay? So that says that the recessive trait is hid by the dominant trait. So if you've got genes where you've got a dominant trait, then you're going to see the dominant trait. You will not see the recessive trait. The only time you're going to see the recessive trait is if you remove the dominant trait and have two recessive traits. That's the only time you see that. So when we're talking about that, we need to make sure that we understand how to represent this when we're looking at genetics and we're talking about traits and we start doing Punnett squares. So dominant alleles are always represented with a capital letter. Okay, in this case they chose B. You can choose any letter, any letter of the 26 letters of the alphabet. They tend to choose something that helps them remember what the gene is supposed to be expressing, like T for tall. And height is genetically linked, but it's also environmentally linked, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But if you're talking about brown hair, then you choose B. I do suggest that you stay away from letters that are difficult to tell the difference between the capital and the lowercase, like O. O is difficult to tell if it's a capital or lowercase. S, X, those are hard to tell. But B's, D's, E's, those are easy to see. So here they used a B, showing that dominant alleles are represented with a capital letter, capital B. Recessive alleles are represented with a lowercase letter, or lowercase b. They both are coding for the same gene, but one is dominant, one is recessive. Okay? Two of the same genes is called a homozygote, or purebred. Homozygote means that it's double dominant or double recessive. So capital B, or lowercase b, lowercase b. Those are homozygotic dominant, homozygotic recessive. The two different alleles are considered heterozygotes. Hetero being different, homo being same, hetero being different. Homo same, hetero different. Okay? And that would be when you've got a mix, when you've got one dominant gene from one parent and one recessive gene from another parent. And so you would only see the dominant trait, but he's carrying the recessive gene. Carrier. Okay? So, different alleles, hetero, capital, lowercase. Same alleles, homo, capital, capital, lowercase, lowercase. Important that you know that. Okay. So, you can get 3 different types of combinations from this. If you're talking about one gene that is monogenic. Okay? Mono meaning one, gene meaning genic meaning gene. Okay, so you've got homozygotic dominant, which means 2 dominants, means the trait that you're going to see is the dominant trait. You have heterozygotic dominant. The dominant covers up the recessive gene, so you're only going to see the dominant trait. But if you have a homozygotic recessive, then you receive 2 recessive genes, and the phenotype you will see is recessive. Okay? So in order to see a white flowering pea plant, you have to have a homozygotic recessive genetic line on that pea plant. So dominant, I'm going to check and make sure that the film's still rolling. All right, excellent. Dominant can be genetically capital T, or capital T, lowercase t. Recessive, lowercase t. I know it sounds like I'm really drilling this in on you, but that's because that's what you need to know. Like, I wouldn't waste my time saying it if you didn't need to know it. All right? The letter combination, so being capital or capital lowercase, is called the genotype. Okay? It's what you carry in your genes. Those are your sex cells. Okay? That's in your body. Genotype, genes. Okay? Those are what your genes say, but not necessarily what you see. What you see, or the physical expression, is called the phenotype. Okay? The phenotype is what is expressed by those genes. So if you've got somebody that has dominant traits, so it can be homozygotic dominant or heterozygotic, then you know you're seeing the dominant trait. Brown hair, dominant. So you can have a person who's genetically brown-haired, or capital B, and a lowercase b, so also has a recessive for a blonde. That doesn't make their hair ashy. No, it makes them have brown hair because the brown's dominant, the blonde is hidden. Okay? So the physical expression, or the phenotype, would be of the dominant trait. The only way you're going to see the recessive trait expressed, the only way you're going to see the expressive trait expressed is if you have a homozygotic recessive. Okay, that's a lowercase. So in my genotype, I know that I express, or that I'm homozygotic recessive for a lot of my genes. My red hair, my green eyes, my extraordinarily pale skin. I'm going to stop there. All right, but I don't have a lot of dominant traits. I'm homozygotic recessive. If I had received dominant traits, then I would have dark hair, darker eyes. If I had the genetic trait for blue eyes in that polygenetic map that I'm going to show you, I would probably have more blue eyes than green eyes. Green eyes are a homozygotic recessive trait, but remember I told you that there's about 7 different genes that control eye color. All right, so keep it straight. Genotypes in your genes, yeah? Genotype in your genes, sex cells in your genes, okay? Phenotype, what you see, what you see. I want you all to say phenotype right now. Just do it, disease. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to look at this, and then we're going to go over the answers.